Welcome back. You tuned into Afternoon Enlightenment with me, your host Mariam, only on Salam Media. And now we are in good company learning all about Zakat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, Zakah along with Salah is mentioned over 70 times, and it's always linked where it says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa aqimus salata wa atuz zakat. It means establish zakah, establish Salah and pay your zakat. Zakat purifies your wealth, and also it protects your wealth. It's a wealth. You know, we have this buzzword about income protector and wealth income protector, and what mechanisms you can put in place to protect your wealth, your hard-earned funds. Well, today my learned guest, Sister Fayruz Mohamed, who is a chartered accountant and a certified director, is an internationally certified in Zakat management and qualified in Islamic finance, is going to reiterate and reinforce that the best way to purify and protect your wealth against any losses is paying your zakat and paying it in the proper manner. Also, that is why it's so important to educate ourselves and empower ourselves regard to ensure that we are paying our zakat correctly, because payment of your zakat correctly is what is going to fortify your wealth, what is going to, and besides all this, to get barakah, we all want barakah in our money. We ask for barakah, we make the dua. So paying that zakat is also going to give you the bonus of barakah. So let me welcome a person, a sister. She's also a kindred sister, because just like myself, she's passionate about female empowerment, especially in the workplace, and it's led her to establishing the SANZAF Women's Empowerment Program and developing and enhancing policies for the improvement of the females on her team. She's also recently established SANZAF Women IBF Islamic Business and Finance Forum, aiming to create a platform for women within the Islamic business and finance sector, with the objective of fostering development, sharing knowledge, experience, and networking with like-minded women. And we definitely like-minded, because I'm passionate about this field as well. So without further ado, let me welcome Zakat expert Sister Fayruz Mohamed of SANZAF. And this segment is brought to you by SANZAF. Assalamu alaikum, Fayruz.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Malima. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, and yourself?
I'm very well, alhamdulillah. Shukran for having me here today. Very honored.
Only a pleasure. So let's just do a quick recap from last week. We ended off by our kindred sister, should I say, your colleague and friend of mine as well, Yasmina, who is the CEO of SANZAF, and that's when we started to explain. And then I told her we're going to have it's a prelude to what Nisab is. And then today we're going to go a lot more in detail in terms of Nisab and what conditions must be present before Zakah is due on one's wealth. So let's get straight into this.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina wa biyana wa maulana Muhammadin ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Shukran. Yes, Mu'alima, last week we briefly touched on Zakah and in terms of how it fits into the ecosystem, etc. But today we're going to focus on just a bit more around, the framework of Zakah and what conditions need to be present before Zakah is actually due on one's wealth. And when we look at the 4 conditions or the 4 shurut before Zakah is due, we just need to clarify that all 4 of these conditions must be present. So not just 1 or 2, all 4 of them. And I usually say that when you're stuck in terms of whether, the wealth that you have, whether you need to determine whether it's zakatable or not, if you follow these 4 conditions, it will actually clarify and make it much more easier for you to identify whether, you need to pay zakah on one's wealth. So when we start with the first slide, we have these 4 conditions that are present. And I'd like to just say that our guidance are from Quran and Sunnah, but also obviously from the interpretations of the various jurists. So you may have difference of opinions, And I will clarify, when there are these differences, and you may just need to, seek some advice from your mufti or from your sheikh, etc., just to, confirm that, this applies to you. So also just to clarify that when we speak about, zakah, we speak about the wealth of, everything that we have, that we've accumulated. So it would be not just one category, but accumulation of wealth. So let's just get stuck into it immediately. And the first condition that we say that needs to be present is that of ownership. So when we move to the next slide, it will tell you exactly that ownership is where you have absolute ownership. So we own wealth that belongs to your spouse or to your parents, for example, anybody else. Wealth only that absolutely belongs to you. And an easy test for us to generally determine whether, the wealth belongs to you is that, can you dispose of it easily? Can you gift it? Can you give it away? Can you sell it, etc.? If you're doubting whether you can actually do any of those things, then you may just need to go back and find out exactly whether you actually own this wealth, because that is the first condition that has to be met. And when you say, yes, this wealth belongs absolutely to me, we move on to the next slide, which actually just gives us the second condition, which means, does this wealth lend itself to grow or growth? So say, for example, you can have physical assets that grow. So agriculture, livestock, they physically grow. But when we look at cash, for example, it grows in value. So, or investments, for example. So the wealth must lend itself to grow or actually grow. So those are the first two easiest conditions that people can generally determine whether, you've met the conditions or not. The second two, though, is not so easy, but if I go through them, and we're going to kind of just give an illustrative example as well, you'll be able to, take it from here to be able to understand it better. So the third condition is that of nisab. So what is nisab? And you may have heard this, Yasmina mentioned it last week as well. So nisab is that minimum surplus net zakatable wealth. So when we say net, it would be your gross zakatable assets less liabilities gives you your net zakatable assets. So it's that surplus wealth that that you own. So surplus in the sense that it's not money that you need and use every day. It's money that, or wealth that's sitting somewhere, it's accumulating, it's being invested, it's working for you, etc., in a sense that it's not consumed and used from you or by you at least. So it's surplus wealth that you don't need, that you don't use. And we use gold and silver to calculate the nisab. And if you had to do the calculation for nisab, it's based on 612 grams and 0.36 grams of silver, or 87.48 grams of gold. And if you had to do it, I think the 31st was on Saturday. So when I...
Yes. Go ahead. I'm just checking. You got gold and silver, but you've got the calculation in silver. Why are we doing silver and not gold, Sister Fayruz?
Shukran Malima, that's a very, very good and important question. We look at why we use silver, and there are different reasons why we use silver. And most of the scholars throughout the world actually use silver for these reasons. And the first one is that, silver, if you look at between the two, the value of the nisab silver is, well, if you look at it on Friday, which is when was the last date this schedule was updated, was 8,389 rand and 33 cents. So that was nisab on Friday. But if you compare it to gold, the gold nisab on Friday was around 35,000 rand. So if you compare the difference, you can see immediately that the silver nisab is much less. And the reason why we use silver is because more people can actually participate and contribute towards the pillar of Islam and this act of ibadah. So you'll find so many more people having this minimum surplus of possession of wealth, which means they now actually have to participate, or at least can participate in this act of ibadah, which then obviously also means that more people will be able to benefit. So now obviously more, because we have the kitty is obviously grown, more people will be able to benefit, as the 8 categories of beneficiaries who are entitled to receive zakah, who has been ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are now entitled to receive zakah. And then also another reason is that we use silver because most people, you and I, have mixed wealth. We have gold, we may have silver, we may have investments, we may have cash, etc. So because it's mixed wealth, we then use silver from that perspective. So that is the reason why we use silver. A majority of the scholars recommend we use silver as the nisab. We don't usually generally use gold, but it doesn't mean that you can't, but it's most recommended that we use the silver nisab. And if you had to do your calculation on Friday, the silver nisab would have been 8,389 Rand. So what this means is that if your zakatable assets less your liabilities, which is your net zakatable assets. So if we go to the next slide, I think it is that slide, which gives you this, and this is what I may want the viewers or listeners to leave with. If they remember nothing else, I want them to remember this, that your zakatable assets less liabilities, which you're allowed to deduct, equals your net zakatable assets. If that is equal to or more than the nisab, then you may be liable to pay zakah. I repeat it, if your zakatable assets, which would be your cash, debtors, investments, RAs, etc., less your immediate liabilities that you're allowed to deduct, equal your net zakatable assets. If that value is equal to or more than the nisab, which on Friday was 8,389 Rand, for example, if that net zakatable assets is equal to or more than that, then you may be liable to pay zakah. And I say may because if you look at the next slide,
so Sister Fayruz, what we're gonna do is
Mariam,
let's go for a short break, because before you go to the next slide, I want to even delve into the liabilities. What are the liabilities and what do you regard in the framework of zakat is immediate liabilities and debt as well. So let's go for a short break, and when we come back, we can continue. Shukran.
info@gardiglobal.co.za. Safe, long haul into Africa is our business. Gardi Global Transport.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
SANZAF's Meals Distribution Project aims to create food security for those in need. By supporting our program, you can help us in our mission to provide access to nutritious meals on a daily basis and help us extend our reach. Join SANZAF in the fight against hunger by contributing to our food security initiatives. To learn more, visit sanzaf.org.za or call 011 834 6046. SANZAF, changing lives through development and relief.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back, and we're busy with the segment Contextualizing Zakah within the Islamic finance framework, and I have National Chairperson of SANZAF, Sister Fayruz Mohamed, with us. And we stopped where she said net zakat is your nisa less your liabilities, and that will give you. And I needed to just check now, when we speak of liabilities, what do we speak about? So if somebody has taken a bond out and they now owing on the home 600,000, so do we calculate that 600,000, or is your liabilities just the month-to-month expenses? So let's see what Sister Fayruz advises us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Shukran, Malima. So when it comes to liabilities, there are actually differing views when it comes to, what you're allowed to deduct. But the most practical and the most common view and SANZAF's view is that you're allowed to deduct those immediate necessary expenditure. So like you mentioned, the example, your bond is 600,000, but however, your monthly bond may only be, for example, 10,000. Now, what are you allowed to deduct? So what are you then allowed to deduct is those immediate necessary. So what's immediate would be the 10,000 Rand, not the 600,000 Rand. So you're allowed to deduct, for example, your bond, your rates, your telephone, your normal monthly immediate expenditure that you would have paid. So doesn't include your gym membership and DSTV, because those are obviously not necessary expenditure. It only relates specifically to those that are necessary, that you meant to have paid, at a particular point. So when we look at that slide again, it's your zakatable assets less those immediate necessary liabilities would give you your net zakatable assets. So say, for example, that is equal to 30,000 Rand. And the nisab today, let's assume it's 8,500. Because that amount is more than the nisab, you may be liable to pay zakah. And I repeat myself, I say may, because there's still one more condition that needs to be present before zakah would be due on your wealth. And the fourth condition, if we go to that slide, would be the condition of whole. So whole is how long you need to hold this minimum surplus wealth. And whole is you need to hold it for at least 12 Islamic lunar months. So it's, for example, if today would be the 12th of Ramadan, it's the 12th of Ramadan to the 12th of Ramadan, not the 3rd of April to the 3rd of April. Because remember, the Gregorian calendar is about 10 days more than our Islamic calendar. Yes, so you always use the Islamic calendar date. You do not use the Gregorian calendar. So whole would be unique to everybody, because the very first time I held the minimum surplus wealth, which is nisab, that would be my whole date, and that date wouldn't change. So if I, for the very first time, held nisab, today would be my calculation date, and every year on this date would be my calculation date. So that is why it's very important that the individual actually jots down this date, because many times we hear people say, I can't remember if it's Muharram, I can't remember it's Dhul-Hijjah. If you really can't remember your whole date, and you've made the effort to kind of figure it out, if you can't, choose a date. And most people choose the month of Ramadan. And then we can understand why, because, people are much more spiritual, much more giving, much more compassionate. And there's so much, much more blessings, in the month of Ramadan. When you choose this date, you've got to then stick to it and be consistent, going forward. But that just to say that if you've held the nisab for at least the 12 months, there will then be zakah due on whatever wealth you have in your possession, which is that net zakatable assets, which includes cash, debtors, gold, and investments, etc., times 2.5%. So those are the conditions that need to be present before zakah would be due on your wealth. But I'd like to maybe just illustrate it with an example, if I can, Mu'alima. In the next slide, I maybe just want to clarify to some of the viewers or listeners, how do you actually then determine, if you pay zakah or not? So if you've never paid zakah before and you're now a salary earner, and Sister Yasmina started with it last week, and, let's assume the nisab is 8,000 Rand. You now started to work and you now managed to save 8,000 or 5,000 Rand per month. You also managed to get a quarter, maybe, you have a business and you also receive 10,000 Rand that goes into your bank account through either dividend or profit share, and you manage to save that too. So at the end of the day, you managed to save 200,000 Rand. So for the first time, a salary earner, let's assume they're a salary earner, the very first time they've held nisab was on the 1st of Muharram. So they've held nisab. But the fourth condition is that you actually need to hold this nisab for 12 Islamic months. So the next time they actually do this calculation is next year on the 1st of Muharram, which means there will be no zakah due on their wealth on the 1st of Muharram, because that's only the first time they've held nisab. Next year, on 1st of Muharram, they now need to determine what they have in their possession. Remember, zakah is not due on source of income. It's not due on what you earn during the year. It's due on what wealth you have on your possession, surplus wealth you have in your possession on your whole date. So if it is a salary earner in this example, you will only do your calculation for the next time on the 1st of Muharram. And if that is equal to or more than the nisab, then you will pay zakah on that date. But let's assume it's somebody that pays zakah every year, and they've held nisab on the 1st of Muharram, which is the 8,000 Rand. Now they've managed to save all the savings that we've had in the example here, and they now managed to save 200,000 Rand. Because they also managed to receive, like I said, these dividends during the year. What do they pay zakah on? They will pay zakah on the 200,000 Rand, because that is what they have in their hands on the date of their calculation. Because when you look at the end of Dhul Hijjah, which is exactly in terms of the 1st of Muharram, you have 200,000 in your possession, and because you've held the nisab for 12 Islamic months, you will pay on what you have in your possession, in your hands, on the 1st of Muharram, on the 200,000 times 2.5%, including any other wealth. So if you do have investments or gold or debtors, you've got to include that as part of this box or this basket of yours. But let's assume you only have the cash, so you'll pay on this 200,000 Rand. So when we look at, alhamdulillah, when we look at the next slide, we know that there are zakatable assets that we speak about, what you need to pay on. And we'll cover that next week, inshallah. But what I want to cover today is more on what
and
you
that
do
I was
not
going to,
pay
I was
zakah
going to
on.
allude, yes. So all your, what assets so we can exclude this now as well. So if we're planning to pay our zakat before this, we know what we can exclude this on.
Yes, shukran, Mu'alima. So with that, these are a list of zakatable or non-zakatable assets that you do not need to pay zakah on. And the very first one is that of personal assets. So it's the home you live in, the motor vehicle you drive, the furniture that you have, your paintings, your books, I've even asked AMC pots. It's everything that you consume and use in your daily life, irrespective of the value of that asset. Your home may be R1 million, or at least I should rather say my home would be R1 million. Your home could be valued 10 million Rand, irrespective of the value of your home. Irrespective if you have two homes. So, there may be circumstances where you have two family homes. The husband may have two wives, for example. Both those homes, if it's of a personal nature, it would not be zakatable. Even if you have a family holiday home, that you use, that the family goes, you go, for example, that would not be zakatable, irrespective of the value of that home. Another category of non-zakatable asset is that of capital assets. And this is a very interesting example and very common that they have, is that you may have another property where, you've purchased it for the intention of a long-term investment. So it's a capital asset. And the question we generally get is, is this capital asset zakatable, or is the net rental zakatable? When we look at the purpose of a property that was purchased for an investment purpose, the value of that property is also not zakatable, because it's used as a means to make money. Similar to tools of trade, it's not zakatable. The net rental income may be zakatable if it's still in your possession, still in your hands on the day of your calculation. So, for example, if you're renting a property and you're living off that net rental income, which means you pay your school fees or your groceries, etc., you're living off that and you never manage to save anything. And the easiest way is, you have one bank account. The rental comes in, the expenses of the property, the levies, rates, etc., goes off. If you have any of that left in your bank account on the date of your calculation, then you will pay zakah on what is left in your hands on that date. But if you live off it, you don't pay zakah on what is expensed, and you don't pay zakah on what is earned, but you pay zakah on what is in your possession of a zakatable asset at the date of your calculation. So the other non-zakatable asset that we mentioned in this category are tools of trade. So anything that you use in the production of income. So we may have, like we've discussed, I think when I was in Johannesburg once upon a time, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and we spoke about these, there are many, individuals, women that are now own micro businesses where due to circumstances they have, like you said, a hustle on the side. They have a business and they don't realize, that the assets that they may have within this business could be zakatable. But the asset that is not zakatable are those that you use in your business, like your equipment, your machinery, your delivery vehicle, your plant or your admin building. Those assets are not zakatable because they're used in the production of income. You use that to make money. And at the end of the day, the money, which is cash, is a zakatable asset, will be zakatable at the end. Another asset that's also not zakatable is waqf. If you look at a masjid, you look at anything that is for public benefit, there is no absolute owner. I can't say the masjid belongs to me, I'm going to pay zakah on it. So anything that's waqf is not zakatable. Another category is anything that is unlawful. So anything that you may have acquired or earned that is haram wealth, like goods that you may have stolen, Allah forbid, that you may have cheated, that you may have, earned through gambling when you were not, much practicing, but now, alhamdulillah, you're practicing Muslim, and you have this wealth. Paying zakah on unlawful assets does not purify wealth. Remember, one of the meanings of zakah and one of the objectives or the purposes of zakah is purification of wealth. Zakah will never purify unlawful wealth. So people sometimes think that, if they pay zakah on unlawful assets, it purifies it. It will never purify it. So like interest, you cannot consume it. You need to discharge and dispose of it as soon as possible. You obviously cannot use it for your own benefit, and hence you cannot pay zakah to purify any unlawful assets. Another category is that of anything that you do not derive any benefit from. If, for example, if you've lost something, and you obviously don't know where it is, you don't pay zakah on something that you do not derive any benefit from. Similarly, obviously something has been stolen from you, don't pay zakah on that. Similarly, if something, for example, has been taken from you where you may, like for example, like the sheriff of the courts, they may, have taken goods from you and there's no recourse of you ever getting it back, you obviously don't pay zakah on any of those goods either. And then lastly, we look at, there are certain specific, metals and stones that are not zakatable. If you look at palladium, if you look at platinum, it's worth more than gold and silver, but it's not zakatable. Likewise, like diamonds, pearls, precious stones are not zakatable. So these are a list of non-zakatable assets of which, you do not pay zakah on. Alhamdulillah.
So alhamdulillah, you've given us the list that what we can exclude now, and next week inshallah it will be now whatever will be liable to pay zakah on. There's one more that I'd like to ask you before I let you go, Sister Fayruz, because that seems to be a gray area. So if you can just tell us that a company pension and provident funds where we don't have an option, it's the rule. You join the company, you have to pay your 7.5 and the employee pays their 8.5. What about that? Because that is, I don't have a choice. I didn't choose to put my money in this investment platform. So will that money be liable for zakat if it's a compulsory work provident or pension fund scheme?
That's a very important question, Malima, because that's a question we actually get very, very, very often. And because obviously people are in working scenarios and they want to understand whether, the policies that they have are zakatable, or at least specifically relating to the retirement savings. So that's basically what pension, provident fund and retirement funds are. They are there as a means or tools for you to save when you reach retirement. So maybe just as you mentioned, there's a difference between pension fund and pension provident fund and retirement annuities. So when we speak about pension and provident funds, so this is usually where is an agreement or contract in place between an employee and employer. I, for example, like you mentioned, this is a compulsory nature where I'm now employed. Let's assume I'm employed. I'm a volunteer at SANZAF, but let's assume I'm employed at SANZAF. I now sign a contract that I will contribute, let's say, 5% towards SANZAF's Provident Fund, and they will contribute 9.5%. I signed that contract at the beginning of my employment, and because of that contractual engagement, I am obligated to contribute 5% towards the Provident Fund. While I'm in this employment between SANZAF, there will be no zakah due on the value of that fund every year. If, however, I decide that because I have a little bit more disposable income on my side, I actually want to contribute 7% towards this Provident Fund. Remember, the 5% is the compulsory nature, that is by contractual obligation. The extra 2% is what I want to give as an additional savings towards my retirement. And because I'm choosing on a voluntary basis to contribute more to my retirement savings, I will have to pay zakah on the 2% every single year, net of taxes. So just to be clear that only the compulsory element is not zakatable, but that additional part that I'm taking out by my voluntary discretion, I will pay the 2% extra. The retirement annuities, however, is different in that there is no contractual obligation, because as a volunteer, I am not employed by SANZAF. For me, by nature, I'm unemployed. So if I also want to belong to a retirement savings scheme, I have to take out a retirement annuity so that I can, when I reach retirement, also receive some sort of monthly annuity, when I reach retirement. I have to belong to a retirement annuity fund. And because of that voluntary nature, I could have invested it in a business, I could have put it away as savings, I could have bought gold, for example. Because I chose to put it in a retirement annuity, I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. I knew what the conditions are, because remember, it will be locked away. I won't actually have benefit of that fund only when I reach retirement. And because I knew exactly what I was getting myself into, I knew exactly the terms and conditions, I will pay zakah on that value of that retirement annuity, less the taxes, every year. So that's the difference between a Provident pension fund and a retirement annuity. Always say to yourself, was this by my discretion? Did I do it on a voluntary basis? Or was there an employment contract that made me obligated to contribute towards this fund? So that's, remember, if it's due to a contract of an obligatory nature, compulsory nature, you do not pay zakah on the value of that fund while you're employed at that company. But if I'm taking out a discretionary, voluntary nature, which is usually the RAs, I will pay zakah on that fund, less taxes. So that's the difference, Malema.
Shukran for enlightening us and educating us on this aspect. I think for all those that are in the workforce and working, this is very, very important to accurately calculate our zakat and ensure we're paying the correct amounts. I'm looking forward to our discussion next week, and for you to enlighten and engage and upskill us regarding our being able to fulfill this important third pillar of Islam and Deen. So it's not about paying zakat, it's about being able to practice upon this important vital pillar that is it's next to Salah and mentioned in the Quran as such. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We're going to go for a short break, and then we're discussing oral hygiene in Ramadan, a bit of a controversial issue. So which person are you, the one who brushes before suhoor or after you had your suhoor? We can just take a little poll. I'm going to get Shazia and Mohamed to tell us what's their hygiene habit before, after suhoor in Ramadan, with dentist Sister Fahima Ismail Ravat. All this after the break.